The Forgotten Ones. The old hospital stood on the outskirts of town, its crumbling facade hidden beneath a thick curtain of ivy. Decades ago, it had been the town's only maternity ward, but rumors of disappearances and medical malpractice had shut its doors for good. Now, it was just another relic, a place swallowed by time, until three young souls unknowingly retraced their origins. Isla, Noah, and Finn had always felt like strangers in their own skin. Though raised in separate foster homes, they shared an unexplainable connection, a lingering shadow in their dreams, whispers in the dead of night, and a name that none of them could remember, but all of them knew. They had first met when they were 18, a court-ordered reunion that was meant to give them closure. But instead of finding solace, they discovered something far more disturbing, a blood-stained file detailing their birth, marked with a single word, Subject 13. A name that shouldn't exist. The triplets sat in Isla's dimly lit apartment, the only sounds coming from the storm raging outside. The old file lay between them, its pages yellowed with age. "This doesn't make sense," Noah muttered, running a hand through his messy hair. "Why is there no record of our biological parents? No birth certificates. Nothing." Finn flipped through the pages again, his hands shaking. "And what the hell is Subject 13? We weren't just abandoned, we were erased." Isla remained silent, staring at the last page. It was a report from the hospital's former director. Termination attempt unsuccessful. Subjects must be monitored. Her breath hitched. Someone tried to get rid of us. A heavy silence filled the room. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows. For years, they had all felt like something had been watching them, lurking just out of sight. And now they knew why. "We have to go there," Isla finally whispered. "To the hospital. A place that shouldn't exist." The drive was long and filled with uneasy glances. The hospital loomed ahead, barely visible through the mist. The iron gates were rusted shut, but Isla squeezed through the bars first, her brothers following close behind. The moment they stepped onto the grounds, the air grew heavy. The silence was unnatural, suffocating. Noah shivered. Something feels wrong. They pushed open the rotting doors, and a gust of damp, stale air rushed to meet them. The walls were covered in peeling paint, the tiled floors cracked and uneven. Faint outlines of old hospital beds and rusted equipment lay scattered in the darkness. Finn held up his flashlight. "Let's just find the records room and get out." They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the abandoned halls. But as they turned a corner, Isla stopped dead in her tracks. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them. Infants wrapped in blankets, newborns in hospital cribs. But one set of pictures stood out. 3 babies identical, each with a name scribbled beneath. Isla, Noah, Finn. Noah let out a shaky breath. They knew who we were. A cold shiver ran down Isla's spine as she reached for the pictures. But the moment her fingers touched the frame, the hallway lights, long dead, sputtered to life, flickering erratically. A soft hum filled the air, like something awakening after years of dormancy. Then a voice. Low, hollow, unnatural. "You shouldn't have come back." A past that shouldn't be remembered. Isla spun around, her breath catching in her throat. The hallways stretched longer than before, twisting unnaturally, the walls seeming to pulse, as if alive. Finn staggered back. "Guys, we need to leave. Now." But the hospital had other plans. A sudden, deafening screech filled the air as the floor beneath them shifted. The tiles cracked apart, and a force pulled them forward. The shadows around them deepened, stretching into clawed hands that grasped at their limbs. Noah screamed as something cold wrapped around his ankle, dragging him toward the darkness. Isla lunged forward, grabbing his arm just in time. Finn reached for his other hand, their combined strength pulling him back. The shadows retreated, but they weren't alone anymore. A figure stood at the end of the hall. Tall, motionless, watching. Its face was obscured, its form flickering like a dying light bulb. But its presence was undeniable. Isla's voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head. Then, in a voice that sent ice down her spine, it answered. You already know. The horror they unleashed. The triplets bolted, racing through the corridors, past rusted gurneys and shattered windows. The hospital was alive around them, warping and shifting, its halls stretching into an endless maze. The whispers returned, growing louder, overlapping into a deafening cacophony. Subject 13. You belong to us. They turned a corner and stopped abruptly. Before them stood a rusted operating table, restraints still fastened. A decayed file lay open beside it, revealing pages covered in frantic, handwritten notes. Tests unsuccessful. Subjects exhibit unnatural synchronization. Memories erased, but residual connection remains. Finn's hands trembled as he lifted the final page. Emergency protocol. If reawakened, terminate immediately. A chill ran through them. They weren't just abandoned. They were meant to be destroyed. A slow, rhythmic tapping echoed through the room. They turned. The figure was closer. Watching. Waiting. Then, for the first time, they saw its face. It was them. Pale, hollow-eyed reflections of themselves. Distorted. Twisted.
Wrong.
Finn gasped. That's us. The lights flickered violently. The walls convulsed. The shadows closed in. Then, the figure whispered, You were never meant to leave. And the hospital swallowed them whole. The darkness swallowed them whole. Isla, Noah, and Finn felt the air grow heavy, thick like a suffocating fog pressing against their skin. The walls trembled, the hospital groaning as if waking from a long slumber. Then, the world shifted. The floor beneath them was no longer cracked and ruined. The dust, the decay, it was gone. Instead, bright fluorescent lights hummed above, reflecting off pristine white walls. The rusted beds had transformed into gleaming hospital equipment, and the shattered windows now looked out into an infinite, sterile abyss. Isla gasped, stumbling backward. What just happened? Noah turned in a slow circle. This place that's different. Finn's voice was barely a whisper. It's like we stepped into the past. The triplets stood frozen, their minds struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. Just moments ago, the hospital had been an abandoned ruin. Now it was alive, functioning. A distant scream shattered the silence. Isla's stomach lurched. It wasn't just any scream. It was hers. Echoes of the past. The scream rang out again, closer this time. The sound slithered down their spines, awakening something buried deep within them, a memory they had never known but somehow remembered. Noah turned to the others, his face pale. We have to find out what's happening. We have to find ourselves. The hallway stretched before them, sterile white floors gleaming under the harsh lights. The hospital seemed endless, the air pulsing as if it were breathing. As they moved forward, a low, distorted voice crackled through the overhead speakers. Subjects 13, 14, and 15 unstable. Proceed with termination. A sudden flash. A surgical room. 3 tiny infants strapped to cold metal tables. Their bodies trembled, tiny hands reaching out, desperate and afraid. Doctors in masks loomed over them, their faces blurred, their hands stained with something dark. Then, darkness. The vision vanished. Isla clutched her head, gasping. I saw us. They were going to kill us. Finn's hands shook, but they didn't.
We survived. How?
The whispers returned, curling through the air like fingers clawing at their minds. You should have died that night. The hallway ahead flickered, and a door slowly creaked open on its own. The triplets exchanged a glance before stepping inside. The nursery that never was. The room was small and unnervingly clean. 3 hospital cribs sat in the center, perfectly arranged, their blankets still folded neatly. Above each one, a nameplate. Isla.
Noah. Finn.
A deep chill crawled over their skin. Isla ran a trembling hand over her nameplate, her fingers tracing the letters. Then the cribs moved. A violent jolt, as if something was inside, thrashing against the mattress. Noah's breath hitched. We need to go.
Now.
But the moment he stepped back, the lights exploded, plunging the room into total darkness. Then came the breathing. Heavy, ragged, right behind them. Isla turned, her heart pounding. A shadow loomed in the corner, its form twisting, shifting unnaturally as if it didn't belong in this world. Then, in a voice that sent ice through her veins, it spoke. They failed to erase you, but we won't. The figure lunged, running from the unseen. The triplets bolted, crashing through the door, their footsteps pounding against the floor. The hallways stretched and twisted, warping into an impossible labyrinth. Noah's chest burned. Where the hell are we supposed to go? Finn's voice was desperate. Find the records. We need to know what happened to us. They turned a sharp corner and slammed into a set of double doors. Without thinking, Isla pushed them open. Inside was a vast archive, rows upon rows of filing cabinets, each labeled with patient numbers. The room smelled of ink and old paper, the air thick with dust. Finn's eyes darted across the labels. Find our number. Subject 13. Noah yanked open a drawer, rifling through files. His fingers stopped on a folder marked Experiment 13, Termination Report. He flipped it open, his stomach nodding as he read aloud. Subjects exhibit unnatural synchronization. Testing suggests a psychic connection beyond scientific comprehension. Attempts to separate consciousness unsuccessful. When one feels pain, all do. Noah's hands trembled. That's why we have the same nightmares. Why we always feel watched. Isla grabbed another document. Emergency protocol. Should subjects reach maturity, termination is mandatory. Subjects must not remember. She looked up, her voice shaking. They weren't just experimenting on us. They were afraid of us. The whispers grew louder. The walls shook. The triplets turned and froze. The shadow figures had returned.
Dozens of them.
Watching. Waiting. Then, in a collective voice, they whispered, "You are not supposed to exist." The triplets barely had time to scream before the shadows rushed forward. The awakening. Pain exploded in Isla's head. The world blurred, spinning violently as she felt herself falling. And then, silence. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the hospital. She was somewhere else. A room, stark white and endless. Noah and Finn lay beside her, motionless. But standing over them was herself. Or rather, something wearing her face. It smiled. "We have been waiting for you." Part 3. The truth they were never meant to know. Isla couldn't move. Her body felt frozen, her breath caught somewhere deep in her chest. She stared at the figure standing before her, an exact replica of herself. But something was wrong. The smile on its face was too wide, its eyes too dark, too hollow. It wasn't just mimicking her. It was watching her from inside her own skin. Behind it, identical copies of Noah and Finn loomed over their unconscious bodies. The room stretched into infinity, its white walls pulsing like a living thing. A shiver crawled down Isla's spine. "What are you?" The thing wearing her face tilted its head. Then, in a voice that was both hers and not hers, it whispered, "We are the ones who were erased." A nightmare unveiled. Noah and Finn stirred beside her, groaning as they sat up. Their gazes locked onto their twisted reflections, and the horror in their eyes was immediate. Noah scrambled back. "What the hell is this?" Finn gritted his teeth. "This isn't real. This isn't happening." But the copies stepped forward, their movements smooth, unnatural. They flickered, their forms glitching, as if struggling to stay in this reality. The Isla thing smiled. "You took our place." Finn clenched his fists. "What do you mean?" The shadows behind them shifted, swirling like ink bleeding into water. Then, the truth unraveled. The experiment that should have never been. A new vision took form. The stark white room melted into a cold laboratory, filled with scientists in sterile masks. The real Isla, Noah, and Finn lay strapped to medical tables, their tiny infant bodies twitching as wires and needles dug into their flesh. A voice, detached and clinical, echoed through the space. Subjects 13, 14, and 15 display full cognitive synchronization. Mental connection is absolute. However, their counterparts are rejecting separation. Another voice, frantic this time. We need to terminate them before it's too late. The world shattered, pulling the triplets back into the infinite white room. The Isla Thing's grin widened, its mouth splitting at the corners. You don't remember, do you? It laughed, a hollow, skin-crawling sound. You weren't the only ones. Finn's breathing turned ragged. They made copies of us. The Isla Thing's black eyes gleamed. Not copies. It tapped its temple. We were you. The triplets staggered back as the truth sank in. The hospital had never just experimented on them. They had tried to split them apart. Two sets of consciousness, one body. The experiment had failed. The other versions of them had been deemed unstable. And so, the scientists had tried to erase them. But something had gone horribly, horribly wrong. The ones who were left behind. Noah's voice was barely a whisper. You were supposed to be dead. The Noah Thing's face contorted, twisting with rage. We were supposed to be whole. But they ripped us apart, locked us away in the dark, and left us to rot. Its fingers twitched, its entire form glitching as though reality itself was rejecting its existence. You lived our life, it growled. But we never stopped watching. And now we're taking it back. The white room collapsed. A battle of minds. The triplets felt their bodies torn apart by an unseen force, their minds splitting, warping. The world flashed, and suddenly, they were in Isla's apartment again. The rain pounded against the window, the file of their past still sitting on the table. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Isla's breath hitched. Is this real? Then the lights flickered. The whispers slithered through the air. Give us back what is ours. The room darkened, and the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. Their reflections in the window didn't move. They just stood there, staring, eyes void of life. Then they stepped forward. The glass shattered as the reflections crawled out, their bodies twitching, convulsing. They moved in perfect synchronization, their hollow eyes locking onto their counterparts. Finn screamed, "Run!" But the door slammed shut. The Isla Thing lunged first, grabbing the real Isla by the throat. But the moment its fingers touched her skin, pain exploded through both of them. The two Islas screamed in unison, clutching their skulls as a wave of shared agony surged through them. Their minds blurred, memories twisting, merging, pulling them closer to becoming one. Finn and Noah weren't faring any better. Their counterparts clawed at them, their forms flickering between solid and something else, something monstrous. Noah gritted his teeth. They're trying to take our place. Finn's voice was raw. Then we fight. The final stand. The triplets pushed back, their minds rejecting the invasion. The room trembled, the very fabric of reality tearing at the seams. The reflections screamed, their forms glitching violently, until one by one, they began to dissolve. The Isla Thing thrashed, its voice twisting into an inhuman shriek. You can't erase us again. We are you. Isla's vision blurred. Flashes of the past, the experiments, the pain, the separation, all slammed into her at once. Then she made a choice. They weren't going to run. They weren't going to let their past consume them. She grabbed the Isla Thing's arm and pulled. A force like 1,000 voices ripped through her skull. The thing screamed, convulsed, and then it was gone. The apartment fell silent. Finn collapsed onto the floor, gasping. Noah clutched his head, his body trembling. Isla stood frozen, her skin still tingling where the thing had touched her. The shadows had vanished. But deep in the shattered mirror, something still lingered. A pair of black eyes, watching, waiting. The ones who never left. The triplets never spoke of that night again. They burned the files, erased every trace of their past. But some things can't be forgotten. Sometimes, in the dead of night, Isla catches glimpses of movement in the mirror. Finn hears whispers when he closes his eyes. Noah wakes up feeling like he isn't alone inside his own head. And sometimes, Their reflections don't blink.